Hello, hello, hello. Let me get everything. Gotta minimize screens. Anna, I think I saw you in the chat over on the other screen. I have too many screens up right now. Yes. Hi, Anna. How you doing? Okay. Let me just make sure, yep, the things are muted as appropriate. There's so many things that go on for this. It looks like, oh, you just set up a camera and it's fine, but I've got so many windows open. Um, so with my ink reviews, it's exciting because I am officially done with all my samples that I have. I am now moving, I basically had been moving backwards from bottles, or like from my most recent samples to my oldest samples, and I'm done with those, at least until a group buy comes in, then we'll be back to samples. So now we're doing bottles, and my bottles are arranged roughly rainbow. So we're gonna start off with like the blacks and browns, and move all the way up from purples, then up to the pink, then rainbow order up to the pinks, and that'll be it. So today we've got two. We've got Noodler's Black and Pilot Iroshizuku Kiri-same. Noodler's Black is my only bottle of black ink. It is the ink that was my lab ink that I literally kept this bottle in the lab to fill my pens because it is super, super solvent proof and works well on crap paper. So this, if you care about things not dissolving, great ink right here. This one is my absolute favorite gray. Because we're in bottles, we are in the territory of inks I really love because I loved them enough to get a bottle of them. Because that's how I tend to roll. So my reviews are going to be fairly glowing from here on out. There's a couple exceptions in there where I had to buy a bottle. I didn't have a choice but to buy a bottle. I couldn't get a sample. But for the most part, I really like all the inks from here on out. And there's a couple that have specific use cases too. Like I got a highlighter ink in there. But yeah, so I've already filled everything. The article we are doing is on shrimp. As some of you may know, I've been formally trained as a marine biologist. That's not what I do now as my profession, but that's how it happens to most people, is that they go to college for something, don't end up actually working in that field. But this is why a lot of the articles I do focus on marine life. We've got something on the Georgia shrimp industry. I literally worked on shrimp aquaculture for a bit. So that's the article you're getting today. Now I need my every single time. Where is it? So I have this pencil cup that I was digging through. And this is the pencil I always use. It's a Blackwing 1001, but you can't see that anymore because it's been well loved. And then I also have this Hack-Winged CW Pencils Futura. And in a pencil cup, they look very similar because they're pinkish and have a gold Blackwing ferrule. And I always grab this one because it's slightly taller. Every single time. Let me adjust the webcam because it's slightly... The Hipponoto is taller than the rest of the notebook, so it needs its own adjusting. Okay. And I've actually counted roughly, based on signature counts and everything, how many pages I have left in my Hipponoto. I'm going to run out of ink before I finish the Hipponoto. And this whole thing is made up of mainly ink reviews, if that gets you an idea of how fat a Hipponoto is. It's ridiculous. Okay. I'm going to try and angle my mic a little bit away from me and more towards the paper so you can hear scritch scritch. So you might have to turn the volume up a little bit more because it is now not facing towards me. But I also can't aim it completely towards the paper because otherwise the mic falls down because I don't have like a suspension system. It's just a little tripod. Okay. Like I said, I have a whole bottle of this, and I've clearly used a ton of it, though it's probably about halfway done, but I mainly use it on crap paper. I actually really have zero idea of how it performs on good paper, because I've used it on crap paper for the most part. So it's the opposite of my normal ink reviews, where it's like, who knows how to perform on crap paper? Versus this one, I know very well. I just decided to not be able to spell estuary there. That's embarrassing. So this isn't the blackest black ink. It's pretty darn good. But like I said, I bought this bottle of black ink for the solvent resistance to everything. And it performed slightly better on crap paper than the other contender, which was Noodler's Heart of Darkness. Plus, Heart of Darkness was out of stock, so I got this. Okay. Whoever wrote this article knows how to write their life drama. There should be excessive shrimp in the water, but then it was like, but the nets came up empty. Dun dun dun. Okay. Like I said, it's not the blackest black. You can see it's actually got quite a bit of shading, which washes it out on the Tomoe River. I know I've said before in these reviews that I prefer my black inks to just be pitch black, no shading, nothing, which makes it surprising that this is the ink that I have a bottle of. Like I said, I bought it for use on really crap paper where you usually don't see any shading anyway. I did not buy it for use on nice paper. So I've done other black inks that are much better if you love black inks and pretty much exclusively use good paper. That won't give you shading like this. It's also drying fairly slowly, which is typical for the Noodler's bulletproof inks because they need to chemically bond with the paper for the bulletproofness. So they do typically take a fair amount of time to dry on, good paper, because this is Tomoe River. It's very coated and sized and whatever the chemical treatments they use to make Tomoe River do its magic. It takes a long time for that Noodler's ink to sink in. Okay. Like I said, I've mainly used this ink on terrible paper, so you'll see a difference once we get to the shitty paper at the end. the disadvantage of this setup with how I've moved the mic, is that with this particular notebook was always hard to find space on my desk because it's a glue-bound notebook. So it wants to just be open flat, but the way I have to arrange the cameras and everything on my desk doesn't exactly work with that. It works for this, the top half of the page, but the second half of the page is always pretty dicey. It's cold and windy here in contrast to yesterday when it was 70 and it's now in the lower 40s and really windy. So a nice giant cup of tea is appropriate. As you can see, oh, I forgot to adjust the focus. There we are. As you can see, it's a little bit grayer up here. This ink, I prefer most of my inks to have a warmer tone to them. So you've probably seen this bias in my ink samples. So the blacks are no exception. It has some warmer undertones to it rather than a cooler one. And it comes across in what you see on the page right here, especially in a dry pen where there's less ink on the page, so it's a little bit more dilute looking. Now we gotta go do the click because I forgot to do it last time. That's one thing. Someone was posting on the Pen Addict Slack about the Waterman Karen Ombre et Lumière. This is from that same limited release finish. I wanted the Karen, but could not afford it because it was like $400 something at the time. Could afford this one, and this was the only other model I really liked because I like small skinny pens. I love this off-angle finial right here. It's just, So I bought it, and people have admired it ever since, and were like, how did I miss it? This is one of the best finishes Waterman has done, I would say, at least recently, from what I've seen from modern Waterman. I love vintage Watermans, but modern Waterman, this is so good. Everything else has been very boring and like steel and solid color, and it's just like, they need to do something like this again. And again, it goes down very dark black. It is now a little bit more translucent, dilute. Which is ironic because I did buy this specific pack of Kikuyo notebooks because you can buy them in 5 packs to use as lab notebooks. I just left, I left the lab, I left grad school before I actually got a chance to take a crack at them. So I now see that if I had used these as lab books, I would have hated it because the ink does not look as good on this paper as it does on crappy, like, commercial lab notebook paper. Hello, hello. We're doing Noodler's Black right now and transcribing an article about the shrimping industry in Georgia because my background is in marine biology, so I kind of had to. And yeah, like I said, it takes a while to dry because the Noodler's ink has this special chemical bonding nature to it. At least this one, the Noodler's Black in the Bulletproof line, that needs time to bond to the actual cellulose fibers of the paper. So it takes longer to dry when you have these coated or specially sized papers because it needs to get to the cellulose to do its thing. And I desperately am in need of a new Rhodia pad, which is, I can actually get that locally, so that's why I'm not stressed. It's one of the few stationery products I can get locally. I've got two sheets left in this Rhodia pad, so I need to stop by the Dick Blick downtown ASAP. I'm trying to think of, is there anything I need to go in that area for soon? I think I'm just going to make a trip downtown just to go there. And it's going to take an hour because it's an art store. And even if I just need one thing from an art store, I can't go into an art store without looking at everything. It's a problem. Where did I put the little... There we are. I could also place a Jet Pens order because I do need some stuff from Jet Pens. So this one is a pencil, and I do prefer a pencil-like feedback in my pens. So if some of it sounds like a pencil, that you wouldn't be wrong, because that is the type of pen I prefer. And I don't really like as much the really super glossy smooth nibs. I do like some feedback. But there is also a pencil. Yeah, well, the Michaels all around me are chaos war zones that I try to avoid unless absolutely necessary. And they're also out of stock of things quite frequently. I mean, I could get to a Michaels, but like, and also Michaels isn't an art store, it's a craft store, which sounds like a really subtle distinction, and it is, but it does make a difference in what supplies they carry. And also, I just much more enjoy shopping at Dick Blick because I don't have to climb over boxes to get over to the things I need. Oh, this one, yeah, this one definitely has some feedback to it when I write. Like I said, I prefer that. So I'm not surprised that it sounded like a pencil because that is the experience I like out of a nib. I'll listen a little bit closer when I get to it because this part goes real quickly. This one definitely sounds like a pencil. This one, you're right, it sounds a lot like a pencil. Never actually noticed that before, even though it's my own pen. I've owned it for over 4 years. Cool, thanks for pointing it out. Fun things. This is why I like these things. People point out things that I myself never noticed about my own stuff. Though I will say, of all my pens, the one that sounds most like a pencil and has the most like pleasant feedback, it's one of my favorite nibs, is this Aurora Ypsilon, the steel nib. If you like feedbacky nibs, and note I say feedbacky, not scratchy, this is beautiful. You might look at it, say $120 for a steel nibbed pen. One of my favorite, like probably my favorite nib right here. Worth it. Love it so much. Like I said, if you like feedbacky, and also if you prefer smaller nibs, it is a smaller nib. Aurora does make excellent gold nibs, but they're a little chunky for me. But, beautiful. Yeah, like I said, this is still not as pitch black as I tend to prefer my blacks, but I didn't buy this ink for that purpose. So now we're getting to the point to the shitty paper, this generic Staples notebook, and this is the type of paper I bought this ink for because I was using it in a lab setting. I was using it on provided notebooks where I had no control over said notebooks. So, or like a lot of printouts that were getting soaked in salt water. because I was working with tanks, because marine biology. That is what I bought this. I bought this bottle ink because it could withstand abuse. That is why I bought it. And it did the best job of standing up to that abuse. But now, come to think of it, I would probably enjoy hanging out in Michael's a lot more if the actual experience of shopping there wasn't so chaotic. If it was just like the Blick downtown is like there's people in there, but it's calm and organized. I don't have to climb over things. I enjoy looking at all the stuff. I would probably do the same thing if all the Michaels around me weren't crazy. Like the Michaels back home, I'm from New Jersey, and that Michaels is super calm. And probably because it's very new, or at least it was new like 15 years ago. That I always enjoyed being in because it wasn't batshit. Yeah, see, it looks a lot better on the crappy paper. Again, why I bought it. It's for crap paper. Oh, and I smeared the Kikuyu by putting the Rhodia on top of it because it wasn't totally dry yet. Like I said, it takes a while to dry on good paper. Yeah, no. The Michaels, like all like three of them that I can get to easily because I'm in a major metro area. All of them are bonkers all the time, no matter what. It's just, I hate going there. If I have to go to Michael's, I like psych myself up to be ready for a war zone. We'll get to bleeding and feathering. That's always the fun part of this particular notebook is I will flip it over and see how well it does. But so far I got no feathering, but that was also in the dry pen, so that one always performs the best on the shitty paper. If I recall, there is some bleeding, so it's not the absolute pinnacle for crappy paper. Like I said, I bought it to withstand abuse, and by abuse, I mean regular soaking with salt water and other solvents, which is why I bought this. Now there's some feathering with the wet pen, which is standard because this wet pen is gushing, but it's not as bad as normal. Yeah, it could. I don't know. So, the reason I'm hesitating is because I've discovered over like the year plus of doing these reviews that my definition of what is acceptable and what is super wet leans a little on the drier side. That I am fine with a slightly drier ink compared to other people. Not quite sure why. Because this has felt fine to me. It is also Noodler's ink, and Noodler's tends to have batch variation. So it could very well be that your bottle of Noodler's Black is actually slightly drier than my bottle of Noodler's Black, because that's a thing that happens with Noodlers. This is actually, I usually see much worse feathering in the wet pen. Let's see if we can find a good. We can even just flip it over. So I don't know how well you can see this, but this is even just like Diamond Wild Strawberry from last week. It has much worse feathering. So now we're going to see what the bleed through looks like. And yep, this is why I bought that ink. That is the bleed through on terrible paper. Even with wet pen. Booyah. Like I said, this type of paper right here is why I bought that ink. And it's doing its job beautifully. That is some of the best performance out of this whole notebook is full of all these other ink reviews, and there's maybe one or two that have just as good performance in terms of bleed through on bad paper. And they're a lot drier too. Okay. Because again, I can even show you, like, you can see all that from just Diamond Wild Strawberry, Noodler's Walnut, Cactus Fruit Eel. Like, that's so good. It doesn't look all that great on the good paper, but it looks and performs fantastically on the shitty paper. So if you are in an environment like I was, like I said, I bought this for a very specific circumstance of I needed an office. I have no control over what paper I'm going to be using ink. This is a good one for you. And it will also withstand you spilling your coffee on the page. Or, like me, if you are recording data in a lab notebook in front of a bank of saltwater tanks and you have to reach in and out of it, and therefore your hands are inherently wet with salt water when you're writing your stuff, you won't make all your data go away. Okay. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna go rinse out my pens in the bathroom sink, and I can't take the webcam with me, so because it's a desktop. So I'm gonna empty these out and then go throw up the BRB sign, and I'll be back in like 10-15 minutes. Yeah, no, there's a reason why this bottle is like half empty, and Noodler's bottles usually take forever to empty, and that's because it was my lab notebook ink. Like, this is what all my lab notebooks, the data is recorded in, and it withstood a lot of weird solvents and salt water, mainly saltwater, but other things as well. I don't think I got any antibodies on that because I was careful about those because those are expensive. But yeah, I think I got some DMSO on the paper at one point. Stayed put. Yeah, so I'll be back in like 10-15 minutes, and when we do, we'll get to Kiri-same. See ya. Hello, I'm back. So what we got now is we're gonna do Iroshizuku Kiri-same. And I didn't compare inks for Noodler's black because it's black. I guess if you really want it, here's Noodler's black. And I have it, it's basically at the end of my swabs. Comparing swabs of black inks I find is atrociously unhelpful. But for gray inks, there's a lot more subtlety to that. There we are. So I have Kiri-same right at the front of my gray inks. And the reason for this, there we are, doing some manual focusing, is because it's got a lot of pink undertone. And so I have it basically coming off of like my purpley browns. I have it, so Papier Plume Samhain has a purple undertone, and then you go straight to Diamond Moondust, which is like a more regular gray. These are my only two like really strong warm undertone grays. And the webcam is washing it out quite a bit. And there's only so much color correction I can do. I wonder if it looks better up here slightly. It still looks quite as dark. Like you're not seeing as much as the pink undertones, but trust me, it's there. Again, like I said, Moondust is like right on this webcam. Samhain and Moondust look fairly close. Versus like Samhain's very purple. But you can even see the difference between like how much warmer Kiri-same is versus Moondust, or even Mont Blanc Oyster Gray, which is more of a middle down the road gray with some green undertones in it. I really like the warm pink undertones of Kiri-same. It is my favorite gray. The only other gray I have a bottle of is Mont Blanc Oyster Gray, because I like that green undertone. But everything else, like Gris Doux and like Earl Grey has some purpley undertones, but it's so dark. And it's much cooler. Like, once you get that dark, I'm like, you might as well just go with black. I want something that looks gray and looks different from graphite, because I have a lot of graphite. If I want it to look like graphite, I'll just use graphite. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure. I'll definitely put it in with Samhain when I do my swabs, so I usually do 3. Maybe I'll do a pink to show off the pink undertones, even though it's distinctly a gray ink. I don't know. We'll see what it is when I get to that whole scans and everything stage. But I got it in the 15 milliliter bottle. I got a set of 3. I got this, Kujaku and Yamabudo. This was actually the third one that I wasn't sure which third ink to fill it out with. Because I like the smaller bottles. I like to sample inks. Eventually I'll probably get a full bottle of this, which is funny because like the other two were the ones I really wanted, and this one was like, I guess I'll pick a third one, and this ended up being my favorite of the bunch. So, you know, hey, let's continue writing about the shrimp industry in Georgia. Cool. I wasn't sure, because, you know, monitor differences and everything, how things turn out. I always think I color correct really well, but it turns out I've discovered that I have a really poor eye for seeing color accuracy in the moment when I do these things, and I see it better later. Don't know why, but that's the case. So yeah. And you can even see it here. It's a little bit tougher. Let me see if I can. Like I said, the Hippo Noto is fatter than my other notebook, so I need to reevaluate. But it's warmer than the graphite tone. Like I said, if I wanted it to look like graphite, I just use a pencil. So therefore I want it to look unique. It's like that's the point of using a gray ink, is that it looks different from your standard pencil gray. Okay. Complicated biology and ecology. There we are. A lot of people say in the Iroshizuku line, because there's another gray in the Iroshizuku line that's slightly darker and more blue, that a lot of people seem to prefer better, or at least there's more vocal appreciation of it, at least in like the pen addict Slack and everything. And it really comes down to, do you want a warm gray or a cool gray? And as I said at the very beginning of this stream, I tend to prefer the warmer tones in pretty much everything. Most of my favorite inks, you'll see this coming up throughout pretty much all my bottles of ink, lean warmer. And so, therefore, it's no surprise that I like a warmer gray. Okay. The bad thing about this gray is that it's so light. It's one of those where I want, even though it's like the flow is fine in the dry pen, but it's so light that I want to instinctively press harder to get more ink to come out. Yeah, it's close to pencil gray, but it's different enough that you can tell it's not a pencil. Like your first instinct is to go pencil, but then you're like, but wait. That's what I really like about it. It's subtle. And of course, remember that this Tomoe River is cream paper, so it's gonna look slightly different here than it will in the Kikuyo and on the Rhodia. And you can even see now how it's just that increase in wetness makes it slightly darker, and it just is a little bit more readable. Yeah, it's not smearing. And I just wrote this. Yeah. Also keep in mind, this is my driest writer, and it's a fine nib, so that's going to have by far the fastest dry time of all my pens. So I could do a little smear test on the bottom of the page when we get to the wet pen, because that's going to be the true test of how, smeary it is, because it's a wet pen. Yeah, so because I like a little bit more feedback when I write, and I do enjoy using pencils, Tomoe River is not my be-all end-all with paper. I don't really care about smearing as much, but like of the papers I use to review, the Kikuyo is my favorite because it's got slightly more feedback, but it doesn't have the insane dry times. But like Tomoe River as uses, like I use Hobonichi Techo. That's great because you got a bazillion pages in a small package, which is the point of Tomoe River. Yeah, this is one of those inks that's so light, you can really see the difference when you're going from like up in the wetness. It just, that little bit more ink on the page makes that much more difference with this legibility. So it's been 3 lines. Yep, not smearing at all with the wet pen. Yeah, dries quick. Yeah, I normally don't do dry time because, like I said, I don't really care about dry time as an ink property for me. And my stance on that is there are a bazillion other people that review inks out there that do dry time, because I personally don't care about dry time. I'm not going to waste my time doing it for all my reviews. If someone asks me to do a live stream like this, I'll clearly do it. But yeah. For me, the most important thing about inks is seeing what they look like on the page. But yeah, no, this apparently does really well as dry time. It's much better than the Noodler's Black, but that doesn't surprise me because the Noodler's Black is one of the weird property inks, so it does take a while to dry. Yeah, the shading is best by far in the like kind of like middle of the row flow ink or pen. This is one where it's a little bit too wet, like the wetness overwhelms it and just floods it with ink, so the shading goes away. But this is a good middle ground where you do see shading. And remember, I am using fines, so the shading isn't as popping off the page as you might get for some of your broader nibs. And that's one of the reasons why I do this, is because I basically only use fines. That's what I like. I've tried having fatter nibs around and I just ignore them. So this is what I use. I want to look and see what it looks like in fine nibs. But yes, it's a good ink. Like I said, when this little one runs out, and it's the lowest of mine by far, I'm going to get a big bottle. I love it. It's so good. Okay. And that was on Tomoe, so now you get to see what it looks like on all the other ones. And you can see, like I said, this is like, it's smeared after I put like the completed Rhodia pad on top of it. So Noodler's Black takes a while to dry. Okay. I also, that's the other thing about these ink reviews, is that they remind me of, especially now that we're getting to the bottles, of inks that I haven't inked up in a while that I'm like, oh, I should ink that up again. This is one of those. Haven't inked it up in a while. Now I'm like, why haven't I inked it up in a while? It's so good. Join. But yeah, no, Yamabudo's definitely... Yamabudo and Konpeki are the ones in the Iroshizuku line that get all the attention. And probably Shinkai as well. And there's some sleeper hits. Like this one. I don't know why this one isn't more popular, because it's so good. Yeah, this is the point where I'm basically like the other half of this notebook is like up against the mic, and so it wants to just fall down, so I have to like pin it there to make sure it doesn't go away. The setup is not ideal. Which one is Takisumi? Like I said, I'm familiar. For all I'm talking up the Iroshizuku inks, I have very poor familiarity with the ink names of the line. Is Takisume like a teal? I literally have no idea. Is that the black one? I don't know. Ah, okay. So Takisume is the other one, I guess? Hmm. Or like gray black if you say bamboo charcoal. Okay, so yeah, that's the other gray in the line. So that's the cooler gray of the Hiroshizukus. Like I said, this is the warmer one. So maybe this should be the impetus for you to break open your bottle of Takisume. I have inks like that where it's like, I have this ink that I really was looking forward to that I bought that for some reason I'm not using, like my bottle of Private Reserve Avocado. That became very hard to find suddenly a couple years ago. Probably that's when Private Reserve was having mold issues, so a lot of people dropped them. Finally found a bottle after all the mold issues were resolved. Private Reserve's good now. Um, but then I haven't cracked it open. It's like, I know I like this ink a lot. Why am I not using it? Like, I went through a lot of trouble to get it. Not 2 years, 2 decades. My brain inserted a word that was not the right word. Yes, I was gonna say thank you for defining it. Yeah, no, you should. Let this be the impetus for ink up those inks that you really like that for some reason you haven't inked up in forever. Go do it. Because all of us do that, where we just are like, for some reason, I have a whole bottle of this ink because I love it, but I haven't touched it in months or even years sometimes, and I don't know why. Yes, I was actually thinking, okay, so first, you can see that the shading is a little bit better for some reason on the Kikuyu than the Tomoe River. I'm not quite sure why this is the case, but I find the Kikuyu tends to be more representative of what an ink will look like for me every day. This is probably because I use paper more like Kikuyu every day. But this is the ink, this is what I look for properties like shading. This is the paper I look at. If I want to look at sheen, then I look at the Tomoe River. But this will also show sheen to a decent extent. But yes, no, I actually considered, so I start a new like 9 to 5 actually job on Thursday, and it's technically remote, but there's a local office that I'll have a desk in. So I'm thinking of getting a full bottle of probably Kiri-same or maybe even like Kujaku, something in a classy looking bottle to keep on my desk that says I'm a fountain pen person. I don't want to bring in something like my bottle of Ackerman 28, which looks bonkers but is also expensive, and people will probably mess with it. I don't want people to mess with the thing with the marble. I could also bring in something like, I'm not going to bring in my bottle of dark lilac because that is not going to go out in public where people could potentially break that bottle. Mm-mm. And most of my other bottles that look really impressive are also bottles of things that I don't want to risk, like, out in public. That's the other reason, because the Iroshizuku bottles are very useful and also classy looking. I love Ackerman 28. Actually, I should probably write this. Like, ink bottles that look great on a desk. Actually, most of the Lamy bottles are really cool looking. So if I got like, I don't know, a bottle of Lamy turquoise, that would look great on a desk, like a more common one. I actually really like how the short little squat sailor bottles look, but both of my sailor bottles, one is Rikyucha, which isn't really a work appropriate ink, and the other one is original Ebenard, and that's another one that is not leaving the house because you cannot get that anymore. But like the Iroshizuku bottles, the big ones look great. The Graphon Faber-Castell bottles also look awesome. The Giarbon, the sparkle ink ones also look really cool. Maybe I'll bring in like my Emerald of Chivor bottle and be like, haha, haha, look at this fanciness. Other bottles that look good are the Jacques Herbon bottles. Those are similar to the sparkle ink bottles, but they don't have the dipped wax and the like seal string on it, so it's slightly less like fancy, but still looks classy as hell. Um, and I really want a bottle of Rouge d'Orient anyway. And the company I work for, it's up the company like I got a 9 to 5 with is the tutoring company I currently work for. I'm just will be a full-time position now. So red is great for like teaching, right? And that's a really good red. Again, the only issue is because those inks are expensive as hell in the US, like $35, probably $40 once you hit shipping. Do I want to risk that being messed with? Though it doesn't have like the play with me quality that the Ackerman bottles do. That are like, oh hey, I've got a marble in here. Let's have fun with this. Yeah, that you don't put around other people because they'll be like, ooh, let's dip this all over the place. And it's like, nah. Oh, I didn't even notice you were here, Blakemore. Hi. Like, I just like, didn't even look at the username. Yeah, it's something I'll think about. I might just be a little boring about it and do Franklin Christoph Spanish Blue, because that bottle looks... It's a bottle that you're like, oh, that's Franklin Christoph. You're not just like into fountain pens, you like know what Franklin Christoph is and their ink bottles. Like you probably go to pen shows. Because if I have a bottle of Noodlers there... Yes, you did. Like, I'll probably take my bottle of Noodler's Black back into the office because this, like that's what I made it for. Like, that's what I bought it for. This is my, hey, I have crappy paper. And I'll like, take my, like, I have a preppy devoted to Noodler's Black that I really need to clean. But I want something that says to people in the know that, oh, I just don't just know about Noodlers. Like, I go to pen shows. I'm like into this hobby. And so that's why I'm thinking like my bottle of Spanish Blue or like my Robert Oster ink. Something that says, I'm not surface level into this hobby. I'm not like casually into this hobby. I am deep in it. Please talk to me about fountain pens. Where was I even in the shrimp article? The shrimp that didn't have... There we are. I got too distracted talking about fancy looking bottles for a desk. The best and worst part about transcribing an article about shrimp is that at periodic intervals my brain will just like run the reel of stuff from Forrest Gump, be like, you got coconut shrimp, boiled shrimp, just like going through all the different type of shrimp, and then now I want to watch Forrest Gump. Congratulations. Glad I could be of service. This is why I love fishermen, because they're describing the shrimp with this disease as out of gumption. Like they were wore out. Yeah, you can even see right away that the feathering is much, much worse in this than it was up here. Yeah, if you wanted to use, like, I would not recommend using this ink on shitty paper. This paper is actually really good with actual pencil, so if you want gray on a shitty paper, just use pencil, because it works real well. Oh gosh. Now the article says, where does it come from? And then my brain just went, where did it come from? Where did it go? Where did it come from, Cotton Eye Joe? And I'm like, brain, why do you do this to me? Yep. No, like I said, I've worked with shrimp in a lab setting, and that was the one of the biggest issues we had to deal with having them in tanks was we had to have covers over the tanks that were weighted because they would jump so aggressively they would knock the cover off and then jump out of the tanks and then be twitching on the floor. And we would lose a ton when we first started the project. We would lose so many shrimp because they would jump out of the tanks. Okay. Okay. So yeah, like I said, the feathering's not great. And then this is more standard bleed through that we're seeing with this one versus this like real good performance. Yeah, and that's one of those stories that I'll like tell my students, and I swear my students probably think that most of my stories that I tell them aren't true, but they are. I've just had a real weird, like relative to the general population, real weird work experience, despite my age, despite my youth. I've just like in everything I'll tell you here, like I'm like, oh yeah, that time I was in the Galapagos and I turned around and scuba from snorkeling. There was a giant manta ray, and that was fun. Or like, oh, there was a sea lion that just kept messing with me as I tried to put down my quadrat when I was trying to like count damselfish. Also happened. We got weird stories. Anyway, so that'll be it for today. I'm gonna try, like I said, I'm starting a new full-time job on Thursday, but I'm still also continuing to tutor after hours, so it looks like Thursday evenings will probably be good again for regular ink reviews. But we'll see what it's like for me on Thursday when I actually like finish work and like what time I get off and everything. It'll probably be around 6-ish on Thursdays, but I need to evaluate that like once I have a weekend at this job. So thank you for joining me. I'll hopefully see you next week. And also look for, if you want more detail on these reviews, I do scan them and post them to my blog with like full zoomable scans so you can see all the shading and feathering, etc. That link is down there. You can see like the link tree below the chat box. There's also should be links actually on Twitch in the little info boxes, which will be either down there or up there, depending on if you're watching this on mobile or on desktop. Thank you. Thank you for watching me on rerun. I really appreciate it. So yeah, and so like I said, look for them wherever. Look for the scans. It was great. Thank you for joining me. I've been really enjoying being able to get into streaming again. Now that work has settled down. And yeah, I will see you later. Hope you all had a good Thanksgiving and happy Christmas now. And also happy Hanukkah. And Diwali was months ago. And I think there's a minor Eid somewhere coming up. I don't know. Happy whatever holiday. Bye.